It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Well, my friends, I'm thrilled to have Ed Martin back on the show again. If you remember, he was on with Dr. Moylan, and Dr. Moylan will be joining us a little later on the show. However, Ed has his own radio show, and I was privileged to be on it. And of course, when I was on it, his ratings went right to the roof, right to the roof. It's edmartinlive.com. Some of his guests, in fact, today, of course, we're taping the show, but he had Senator Rand Paul, he had Ann Coulter, he had Lou Holtz. It's an informative show. The problem is we got to get Ed out of his shell so he can talk a little bit, you know. But Ed Martin is the president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. Ed, you are an attorney, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So,
do you have some legal issues?
Well, we'll talk after this. So why?
$500 an hour. That's a retainer right there.
You're cheap.
Yeah, cheap guy.
You're
guy.
Cheap. Well, that's fabulous.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Tell me about yourself, Ed, and then your transition from. Well, now you're still a lawyer, but when you moved into and how involved you got with Phyllis Schlafly and who she is, what she represents, etc.
Well, thanks for asking, actually. You know, I grew up in a little town in New Jersey over White House Station. And after college, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and I spent some time overseas. I spent a couple of years living in Italy and working and studying. But I ended up going to law school, as you point out. And my real interest in law school was medical ethics, actually. I was studying how the law fits together with life issues and end of life and the beginning of life. And so I did practice law for a while. I was at a big law firm. I clerked for a big judge. I did all those things. But I kept feeling like I needed to do more. And I was very blessed that the Archbishop of St. Louis asked me to come work for him on public policy issues around pro-life and around the family. And that was the beginning of me not practicing law like a normal lawyer. I went in and out of government a little bit. I worked on elections. I was the chairman of the Board of Elections in St. Louis, where I lived for many years, and I was chief of staff to the governor of Missouri for a couple of years. But Phyllis Schlafly, as you mentioned, has spent her career, her life, she passed away a couple years ago, working on issues that she felt called to by her faith. In the 40s and 50s, it was the fight against communism. In the 60s and into the 70s, it was the question of how we have a conservative party. She was influential in the Republican Party being more conservative. And then she took up the fight against the ERA, which we'll talk about in a minute, but also for pro-life. After Roe v. Wade happened, Phyllis believed we had to have a party, the Republican Party is what she picked, that remained pro-life. And she spent her life, and we talked last show about her book about the Republican Party. She built the pro-life plank into the party with the help of others and defended it all the years that the moderates tried to change it. And in fact, one of the great memories I have is she was in a little room, maybe the size of this area here, with Donald Trump and me and her right before she endorsed him for president in March of 2016. And she said to him, I worked my whole life to make this platform conservative and pro-life, and I want you to help me keep it that way. Remember, the platform of the 2016 campaign was done in the summer, so it's a few months before that. And President Trump said, I'll do it. And he's been great on pro-life issues. He's been very strong. He's been so that's kind of how I got into that. I live now in Northern Virginia because our organization, the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, has a Washington, D.C. presence. And so we have an office on Capitol Hill and our headquarters in St. Louis. So that's what we do. And our goal is to, like you do, to talk about the issues with our neighbors, our friends, the leaders, political folks, and influence them in the direction of pro-life and pro-family and generally the stuff that's actually made America great.
The people who are not pro-life or are pro-choice.
Yeah.
You know, when you encounter them, and I don't mean in a bad way, but you know, in a debating way.
Yeah.
What is their reason for why they think pro-choice, that you can abort an unborn baby?
Yeah.
What do they tell you?
Well, I guess I'm not sure how to answer because, like you, over these decades of doing this, you have so many different answers. But for one thing, our culture has gotten sort of self-indulgent, right, and self-referential, and so people have said, my choice, what I need to decide. I just would say this, though, Sam, and we see it in such a profound way now. technology, and late Phyllis Schlafly used to say this, the ultrasound, when you started to see the image, you know, when you were having your children, you might hear the heartbeat in the stethoscope and you might feel a kick, but it was like the old movies, The Alien, when the thing came out, you were like, wow. Now people see 3D images, and young people are not only are they rejecting the idea of being able to abort that, they're excited about it. Young people, there's a gap between about 25 and 40, maybe 45, where people still want to cling to choice, but younger people are saying, hey, there's something there. There's something special there.
The logic here, okay, and every time I start talking pro-life, and when it comes to a politician, we hear the opposition telling me, Sam, I know you're pro-life, but we have to be concerned about the welfare of our people. We have to be concerned about the economy. We have to be concerned about taking care of these people. You know, and pro-life is, yes, it's a part of it, but you know, you have the liberals that are saying we're going to give this away, give that away, and so I say to myself, well, what? I don't understand. I think the most important thing is life itself, in order for you to benefit from all these other things. You know, I can't get a handle on that.
But you know, one of the things that's happened, and walking into your place here, it's the second time I've been with you, and to see the woman at the front desk, she's interested, she's paying attention. I had a guest as you met, and you know, people are paying attention. If you don't love people, which starts with knowing what God gave us, right? The image and likeness of God. I always say this, even Nancy Pelosi is made in the image and likeness of God. I mean, and so if that's your starting point, then forget about the Niagara Falls. That's beautiful, but the guy next to you in line, this is a miracle, right? So that's the starting point. And I think one of the things we have to do is rediscover that and encourage that and have a joy about it. You talk about what my wife and I are both, I mentioned my wife's birthday's this week. We celebrate a lot of different ways and have fun, but we love to be out. And people don't know that I'm a conservative political guy when I'm out. You just meet them and you start talking about things. The joy you have to be pro-life, I think, to move the culture is what we're sort of missing. We've got to, you know, Mother Teresa, after she died, they had her journals. They said she was having terrible darkness, prayer-wise, but she exuded joy because she knew that's what she was called to. It doesn't mean we're always happy. We all have troubles, but it's a very interesting time, and I think the culture is crying out for more conversation and joy.
Do you see more and more people realizing that the sanctity of life is important? And it saddens me when you say from 25 to 40 that these people, you know, women, and you know, I guess they feel it's their body, they could do what they want to do with it. But here again, the religious point, it's not that's not their body, it's God's creation. If you're a Catholic, I have no idea in my mind how you could even be a pro-life person. But we do have a lot of Catholics who feel it's okay to rip little arms and legs apart and yet go to communion. That to me is just like, it blows my mind.
Well, but there's things happening. In fact, this morning, Sam, I wish I'd sent it to you before we talked. I read about a study, and they surveyed biologists. 96% of biologists said life begins at fertilization. And then they wanted to say they're pro-choice and all, and there's a different argument. But the point here is we have to do what we always do, which is evangelization. St. Paul or you and me is selling the truth, not hiding from the truth, not being nice if you're being a liar, but selling the truth. Back to your point about these folks from 25 to 45, they didn't have the benefit of seeing the science, the technology being so good, and then it's just we're all very, the culture we're in is very, like any time else in history, but selfish and greedy and sinful. And you know, the one thing about our churches being damaged by crisis, we've got to pull ourselves back. I mean, I'm Catholic, you and I talk often, to the sacraments if you're Catholic, to the Bible if you're Protestant, whatever it is, towards the Lord. And you got to do that. You can't just say, well, I am this and hope it works out. You've got to be intentional. It's why we do a TV show together, radio shows, books, because you're trying to pull people towards that good news, and hopefully it helps.
I'm hoping it's helping. It's along the way. Folks, I'm talking to Ed Martin. He is the president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. And when we come back, we're going to talk about, there's a number of books, but this book is called Stopping ERA. And once again, for the likes of me, folks, I don't know how anyone can get up in the morning, have a cup of coffee, and know they're going to kill 5, 10, 15 unborn babies. It's just amazing. We'll be back right after this. Thanks for staying with us, folks. Remember, the Sam Lesante Show could be seen as well as all of our other shows we produce, maybe about close to 30 locally produced neighborhood shows on ssptv.com. The app is no longer there because we went to our website where you get all of the opportunities of seeing all the shows we produce. Ed Martin is my guest today. He is the president of Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. He's also has his radio show every day. It's Ed Martin Live, very simple.com. Tune him in. You'll find out some of his guests. Today he's interviewing Senator Rand Paul and Coulter. He had on Lou Holtz and many guests he's had. I was on, and his ratings went right through the roof.
That's right.
Being, okay, so Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, what is that organization?
Well, so Phyllis Schlafly in the 1970s, and we'll talk about this book, she started organizing people, mostly housewives at the time, to fight for conservative, pro-life, pro-family stuff. So over the next 45, 50 years, the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, it was often called Eagle Forum. Here in Pennsylvania, we have Pennsylvania Eagle Forum. It built out organizations. We're in all 50 states, in the District of Columbia, grassroots organizations. A lot of times it's the people who believe what we believe who find where they're going to fight. So, you know, in Pennsylvania, Ned Pfeiffer, he's been helping elect candidates more than he has been in the state house. In Iowa, we have a great leader. She's in the state house all the time, influencing legislation. So we do that at the national level. The D.C. office out of which I work is partly there to help Trump and the administration do better, and when they're doing well, to encourage them and also influence Congress. So that's what we do. But a lot of our work is publishing. The Schlafly brothers, Andy and John, publish a weekly column. I do my radio show, as you mentioned, and we publish these books. So that's what we're pushing. If people want to find out more, phyllisschlafly.com, you can see the work we're doing.
This book here, Stopping the ERA, there's many books. What primarily are we talking about?
Well, so Phyllis Schlafly, over her 92-year life, she was a writer before anything else. In fact, you talk about the importance of education. When she was, I think, 14 years old, a teacher assigned her a paragraph a day, and Phyllis said, I never stopped writing. She basically was a writer. So we're slowly publishing her works. This is volume 5. Volume 3 was on pro-life, as we mentioned. Volume 1 was hand-picked speeches that Phyllis had given in her long life that she picked out before she passed away. Volume 5 is Stopping the ERA. In the 1970s, when Phyllis Schlafly was fighting against the ERA, she wrote about it a lot. And so this is a volume of her writings on it. And the ERA was an effort to amend the Constitution. It sounds good, Equal Rights Amendment. It would be that there'd be no discrimination based on sex. That's the phrasing. What it would have done was forced women into draft and into combat. It would have made abortion a requirement of all medical professionals, and that we pay for it with tax dollars, and a litany of other things. Phyllis used to say, in the Constitution, he or she is never used. It's citizen. And yes, we had to improve it in terms of race, you know, we got but the idea of messing with the Constitution. Right now, if you did the ERA, and people push it in Pennsylvania, if you did the ERA, you would guarantee transgender rights. The Constitution would be used to make sure that men who want to say they're women could compete in high school women's athletics. The Constitution. Now, we should have a conversation about transgender anyway, another time, but that's what these books are, and that's what this newest one is. It's a good, she's a great writer, so it's a useful tool for folks that want to understand the issue of the ERA. And I was telling you off the air, they're going to do Cate Blanchett, the big movie star, is starring as Phyllis Schlafly in January or February of next year in a mini-series called Mrs. America. And Lord knows what they'll say that Phyllis was like, but they have to cover the story, which is Phyllis stood up to the ERA and beat it with a band of others.
Are any of her siblings alive yet?
Oh yeah, all 6 of her children. She had 17 grandchildren, I think 4 or 5 great-grandchildren while she was alive. So her sons, 2 of her sons work day to day with us, and 1 of the other sons is on our board. So her sons are active in her work.
Basically, you were saying here that Schlafly said this is not a good thing. ERA.
Correct. ERA is not a good thing.
Even though it sounds good. Equal right. It's like
pro-choice. Choice sounds good, right?
That's right.
Choice sounds good. It's not.
Well, I'm pro-choice one way. Before you have sex.
Yeah, right.
That's your choice.
Right.
Okay, you know that if you're going to have a creation,
right.
That's the only difference. Schlafly, I know when I spoke to Lou Barletta, met her.
Yeah.
Okay, and
she liked Lou.
She really did, and she many things. You were telling me about the conversation to tell you what kind of person she is, and the kind of person our president is, President Trump.
Yeah.
When she met, and she mentioned about the pro-life. what did he? Then he followed up with when she died, and how was
Oh
this,
yeah, well, there's a couple things on that. One is actually the value of Phyllis Schlafly to tell people is it's good to be conservative, it's good to be pro-life, but you also got to know how to move the ball, right? And she knew politics. In the meeting with Donald Trump when she was about to endorse him, she asked him two things: help me keep the platform conservative and pro-life. He said he would, and he did. And then she asked him, would you please appoint judges just like Scalia? And he's judges, not justices, judges. And he said, I will. This president will be judged as one of the greatest pickers of judges we've ever seen. When she passed away, Trump came off the campaign trail in September of 2016. He canceled all his events and came to the funeral. And even better, to tell you the quality of the guy and his team, I think Melania is Catholic, by the way, so they knew if they stayed for the whole Mass, it was in the cathedral, that the whole thing would be Secret Service and all. So they requested, could we come right before? I'd like to speak to the crowd. I'd like to see the family, but then we'll leave because otherwise it's all tied up tight. And he came and he gave an incredible speech that basically, I've talked to him once or twice and his team. He knew that her endorsement was so big for a New York developer who had been a Democrat, who had once been pro-choice. Her saying, this guy can do it, he knew it was a big deal, and he came and he spoke about how great a difference she made and what a great person she was.
Before we bring Dr. Moylan on, and the fact that he is now he's founding the Northeast chapter of the Eagles.
Yep.
Your impression, because it's unfortunate that 80 to 85% of the media, no matter what he does, if he had a cure for cancer, they'd find something wrong. It's very sad. Yeah. It's just sad. And you heard the CNN thing with, Zucker, the leaks and what he was saying. It's and you just wonder, what happened to the credibility of what we're in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
sure.
When you met Trump, what was your impression?
Yeah. Well, first, let me say, just to reiterate, Dr. Dave Moylan joined our board. He was recruited as one of the leaders. He started a Northeast Pennsylvania chapter of our Eagles, but he joined our board, our national board, so it's great to have him on. This president, when you meet him, you've met a million people, all these hotshots. The quality of the people, right? This guy is a quality, intelligent person. He was silent during the meeting with Phyllis. He didn't talk. He didn't brag. He was listening because he knew he was in the presence of somebody. I was chief of staff to the governor in Missouri. I met a lot of governors and some big-time people, CEO types. Trump had that quality. He had a quickness of understanding what was going on. He was, and then he's very, very charismatic. Charisma is not just looking right. It's how you are paying attention to other people. He's very charismatic. You're drawn to him in a private setting in a particular way. So I just think he's one of the more extraordinary characters we've ever seen in terms of communication skills, and it makes the media crazy,
Here again, I don't understand why. I mean, he's been successful in all the different areas. If you heard his news conference yesterday, he wanted to have the G7,
big,
no cost to the American people, but yet the Democrats and the wackos that some of them are, and there's a lot of great Democrats. I told you about Senator John Udicak here. He's a state senator, great guy. I mean, he's Democrat. He's fabulous. He's family oriented. I hope someday he becomes governor. He's a Democrat, so it doesn't make any difference, your character. And we're going to bring, so you stay here. We're going to bring Dave Moylan on, Dr. Moylan, folks. He is the founder of Northeast Chapter. They believe in their cause and they live their cause. They're not phonies. I remember interviewing a congressman, you all know him, I don't want to mention his name, and I said, you are pro-life. He said, yes, I am, but let's not talk about it when you're on the air. I said, what do you mean? I'm pro, and that's the phonies we have, folks, in Congress. You know what, though? You'll keep voting them in. You'll vote them in, even though they're phonies, they lie to you, but they're nice guys, and they're nice women, and they smile, and they tell you the things you want to hear, and that's what we have today. We have a disaster in Washington. It's just so sad. How they want their own agendas in, give the country away, kill as many babies you can, tax the people who are working, and it's just sad, Ed. We'll be back right after this. Thanks for staying with us, folks. The Sam Lesante Show. My guest, Ed Martin, president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, and also listen to his radio show. It's fabulous. EdMartinLive.com. A lot of great guests. He is, as I said, the president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. Now, joining us is Dr. Dave Moylan. He is the coroner of Schuylkill County, and he's up for re-election again. But Dave, Ed said you have formed the Northeast chapter. Okay, so tell us how that came about.
Well, this goes back to when I was running for Congress against Matt Cartwright back in 2014. And one of Phyllis's books is entitled A Choice, Not an Echo. And it was basically about kingmakers that would say, it's your turn to run for president. And then that person would be anointed. And for instance, Wendell Willkie.
Wow, yeah.
He was nobody,
Right.
But it was his turn, so he got anointed and he ran against FDR. But the book is replete with these stories going up to the present time. I think she revised the book.
That's right.
But I had to go meet with a local Schuylkill County kingmaker, okay? So it wasn't quite a smoke-filled room, but it approximated that. And the man said to me, "Who put you up to this?" And actually, nobody had put me up to it. That's what surprised them. But it was the fact that my opponent, who was on the surface pro-life, had a 0% voting record. So I said, no, this can't stand. Yeah. So I threw my hat in the ring, and I was told I acquitted myself okay, 43% of the vote total in a heavily Democratic district. But that brought me in contact with Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle Forum at the time.
Yep.
And Ned Pfeiffer, who you mentioned earlier in the meeting, and I was invited to some of these fundraising banquets down in suburban Philadelphia. Ned would have one down in suburban Pittsburgh. I got to meet some wonderful personalities. The first year, it was Lieutenant Colonel Alan West.
Yeah, that's right.
What a dynamic speaker
Amazing.
he was. He came back the following year. The year after that, it was Brian Kilmeade.
Kilmeade.
And then finally Corey Lewandowski. So
Yep.
it's been a wonderful opportunity to meet some wonderful conservative people. But I said, no, with 2020 around the corner,
Yep.
we need to have a strong grassroots organization. And what better than the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles?
That's right.
So that was the inspiration for it.
That's
We've already...
Well, and for us, from our standpoint, Dave Moylan's a doctor and all, but he serves in the public office as coroner. So, because a lot of people say they wanted to get involved in politics, but to run for office, be up for re-election, you gotta be kind of in the nitty-gritty. And so when he came and volunteered to help over a year or two, we kind of vetted him, and then we put him on our national board, and we said, let's start a chapter up here. 2020. Every time, every politician says it's a big election. There's a lot at stake in terms of the direction of the country, pro-life. Trump's on the ballot, obviously. There'll be congressional races, so we're really happy to start a chapter up here. We got an event in April. We're going to have an event next April. We'll make sure to invite you and let your listeners know late April, to keep building our momentum for the organization.
Dave has been a staunch supporter of pro-life since I know him, and the key thing is is that person pro-life? Is that person pro-life? And he feels the way I feel.
Yeah.
He feels that, what's the most important thing? It's funny when someone gets sick or cancer.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, we got to save this life. They'll take them to the best doctors all over the world. But yet unborn babies, they'll just rip them apart. I love this show, Modern Medicine. Your guest is, who was your guest right now?
Cyril Wecht.
Yeah, wow. Fabulous show. Folks, if you didn't see it, it's on our system.
Famous guy. He's a famous guy.
He did very well.
He was involved in the analysis of the Kennedy assassination, the Bobby Kennedy.
Wow.
Jackson.
And
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson, and he brought it up. He was recently all over the cable networks for this Jeffrey Epstein, who was he died in custody, which is one of the things that coroners investigate. But when I asked him about what did he think, and he said, Dave, as Shakespeare once said, there's something rotten in the state of Denmark.
Wow. Well, listen, I wish you the best with this chapter, Dave. Dr. Moylan, folks, is the Schuylkill County coroner. And he's up for re-election. Yeah, it's always nice seeing you.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
The show goes like that. And,
yeah, it does.
We'll get together soon.
I hope so. Okay? Thank you.
Remember, edmartinlive.com. Tune him in. It's a joy. The guy is fabulous. He does a great job. 4 children, 2 girls, 2 boys. He says he wants 2 nuns and 2 priests.
Make it
He
easy.
wants to get to heaven so fast. It's amazing.
right.
We'll see you next time.